When the song It's Yours was complete, Rick Rubin, as I mentioned before, borrowed $5,000 from his parents to press the single, which means to turn the song into a vinyl record that you can buy and listen to. And this is where Rubin did something very smart. Rubin first needed to feature a name on the record for the label that produced it, so he created the name Def Jam, which if you look at the logo has D and J in capital letters. This was his way of highlighting and elevating the importance of the role that the DJ played in hip-hop music. And whilst Def Jam would definitely become a hugely impactful name in the future of hip-hop music, what will have the most impact in the short term is that Rubin actually added his NYU dorm address on the record's sleeve. As Rubin notes about this time in the book, the way that it started was that the first record I made, I was planning on putting out myself strictly for the purpose of breaking even, making back my costs. That was always the plan. And I sold it to Streetwise Records, who offered me more than I thought I was ever going to make if I'd sold as many as I wanted to. Then, as it turned out, it was a hit. It sold, 100,000 12 inches in the New York area, which was a big deal. So why was Rubin adding his address on the record sleeve so impactful? It's because as the record got into the hands of other rappers, they all sent their demo tapes in what they believed to be the grand offices of Def Jam, which in itself is a kind of lesson about how the appearance of professionalism is not hard. So make the thing, even if it feels scrappy to you, because you'd never know who it'd inspire. In fact, there are two people in particular that Rubin's first record, mind you, inspired, which would have a huge impact on his life. The first was that of Russell Simmons. Russell Simmons is described in the book by the owner of Tough City Records, that no one promotes rap records better. So it's a moment of stars aligning when he and Rick Rubin first meet. And whilst Rubin didn't think that most hip-hop records coming out at the time were very good, as the book notes, Rubin thought those that were always had Russell Simmons' name on it, which I love, as it again shows that Rubin's admiration comes from taste and talent, not just that someone is famous. Simmons and Rubin met at a party only a few months after It's Yours came out, where Russell Simmons expressed that it was his favorite record, and he was so excited to meet Rubin, but that he couldn't believe Rubin was white. As Rubin notes in the book, there was nobody white doing anything in hip-hop, and here was his favorite record made by a white guy. But the excitement went both ways, as Rubin also says, I was really excited to meet him because his name was on all these great records, like Curtis Blow. He was already a mogul of music, even though there was no business. It was just a small underground scene. He was already a kind of focal point. So with two passionate energies floating around each other, what happens? They of course become friends. And what is that friendship built on? Respect for each other's taste and talent. In fact, on their second meeting, Rubin showed Simmons a bunch of unfinished beats that he had worked on, which, despite not having any rappers' lyricisms layered on top of them yet, had Simmons note that these beats were hit records in the making. Before long, as Simmons notes, we did everything together. We'd be at the studio every night. If it wasn't at the studio, I used to take him to Disco Fever in the South Bronx. I took him everywhere. But Simmons and Rubin also shared something beyond their interest in hip-hop. They both had released a hit record and seen no money for it. In fact, Simmons, by that point, being 5 years older than Rubin and more experienced, had had 20 hit records. And yet, to Rubin's observation, Russell Simmons was still broke. This is where Rubin says to Simmons, this is dumb. The independent record labels are not really doing much for us, and they're not paying us, so let's do it ourselves. At least we can make sure we get paid and our artists get paid. And so for where Tila Rock's It's Yours, Rubin added Def Jam onto the record sleeve, it was ultimately another record label that actually distributed it. Now, Rubin wanted to make Def Jam more than just a logo. As the book notes, the formation of Def Jam as a record company proper grew out of the knowledge that Rubin and Simmons could take care of their artists and get the job done. Rubin explained that Def Jam was better set up to overcome business obstacles. Instead of going to somebody and asking them to do things that need to get done and them not getting them done, it was easier to just take on the responsibility. It was just not getting done unless we did it. Now, although the book doesn't make much of a deal out of this, I think this is truly the inflection point. The moment where Rubin realizes the agency he has as an individual, as he perhaps even reflected on what he already himself was able to do by himself. It reminds me of this blog post I read earlier this year, which I haven't stopped thinking about because it breaks down what it means to have high agency as an individual. And the writer, George Mack, noted that it was a combination of three distinct skills that are rarely found together. Those are clear thinking, bias to action, disagreeability. And that high agency is like a tricycle in that if you remove one of these three wheels, it stops working. Well, Rubin to me has all of these. I mean, when you look at that list, he's definitely disagreeable. I mean, he basically got his start by telling a hip hop group that he was a fan of that their recent record wasn't good. That takes confidence to speak like that. In fact, that's also where clear thinking comes in because you need to know what you're talking about, which means you need to know what you're thinking in order to convince a group like that you're not just hating on a piece of work because you didn't like it, but that you're a fan and could see the difference between the record and the best work that the group has put out. And of course, this was not a critique for critique's sake. It contained a bias to action. Rubin asked to help, and even though they moved him to work with another artist, Rubin immediately jumped to action and made something happen. And that something became the foundation of a monumental record label. So the lesson we can take here is that, like Rubin, if we spot something, assume nobody else has and make it your responsibility. That's where high agency comes from. And that's how art, creative projects, businesses actually manifest. And so with Rubin and Simmons more officially tied together as business partners, they could finally explore the strengths that each of them had brought to the table. Simmons gave Rubin some of that established credibility by association. And Rubin's genius move of putting his dorm room address on the record meant that the two of them had a plethora of demo tapes to look through that had been sent to Rubin from which they could find their first artist to sign. So Rick Rubin and his friend Adam Ad Rock Horowitz of the Beastie Boys started going through the boxes of demo tapes. And whilst Ad Rock describes most of the tapes as horrible, he did come across one that he once showed Rick Rubin. Rubin admitted he wouldn't describe it as great, but it was different, and I liked it. There was something about it that just struck us as funny, and we wanted to hear it over and over again. That demo tape was made by the now famous LL Cool J.